Hey, my name's Ryan. Got a pretty good session planned today. Gonna implement a few ideas that have been mulling around in my mind. I implemented them last week, but I'm gonna actually talk about why I'm doing what I'm doing today. So, here we go. All right, so as long as you have a few, and by few, I mean, I don't know, 2 or 3, 3 to 5, who knows really solid underlying principles that guide your training that have been tested, are tried and true. The minute decisions that you make within your actual programming probably don't matter that much, but even still, that gives you the freedom to be able to make these decisions and know that at the very worst, right, they might not be as effective as you initially thought, but then on the opposite side of that is maybe you actually have the possibility to impact your training and make some gains that you otherwise wouldn't have made if you didn't integrate those decisions. So if I'm thinking about an underpinning principle that really guides the way that I view training, the one that's most relevant to today is this idea of vertical integration. Vertical integration is the idea that we should train all physical qualities at all times throughout the year, and that you can just emphasize certain ones whenever you feel like it. So physical qualities that are currently really important to me are strength, power, cardiovascular conditioning, particularly from an aerobic point of view, just having a good base of aerobic conditioning, and a decent amount of mobility, where I'm more flexible than the average person. In fact, I'd like to be much more flexible than the average person, particularly in my hamstrings, my hips, my shoulders and wrists, just because weightlifting is so important to me right now. And then there's 2 programming decisions that I'm going to talk about today, which I'll go through in the first 2 exercises, that I feel as though as long as I'm doing a good job of vertical integration and still training all these qualities, that the downside is, well, it's just not as effective of a programming decision as I initially thought, but then maybe there actually is some really good carryover and some gains I can make from doing these exercises in this particular way. All right, but before we get into any of that, let's extend this warm-up out. And anytime you get in some good jumps, every time I jump I start sweating, although I'm sweating pretty profusely already. It's raining outside today. I was going to do some broad jumps, so I'm going to go single leg vertical jumps. I'm going single leg because there's just, if I went both feet at the same time, I think I would run out of space. So that's why I'm doing that. Yeah, we'll definitely run out of space. Got too much ups. Alright, the first thing we're going to do is 4 sets of 5 on overhead press. We're going to add weight to each set. Try to get pretty heavy today. Alright, so the first idea with this overhead press, and why I'm doing this first, I'm just trying to increase strength in that overhead position without any assistance from the lower half, just giving my arms as much of a stimulus as I can. And I think that that's a logical line of reasoning when we use the squat to increase the strength of our legs in an attempt to make our cleans and our snatches and our Olympic lifts better. And also using the squats for so many other things, like sprinting and just being more resilient and things like that. So I think that that's potentially overlooked, and I'm just going to test that theory out through an extended duration in this block of training. Probably give it 4 to 6 weeks and see if there's any sort of effect. This is a really low risk. There's no risk at all in making this training decision. In part because of that vertical integration model. It's yes, I'm emphasizing overhead press and I'm trying to emphasize strength primarily in my arms and my upper body. But because I believe in doing everything at once, I'm doing split jerks after this. So I'm still training those. It's not like I'm dedicating this entire block to only doing that quality that I'm trying to push most. I'm still doing other things, so I'm still training everything I want to train. Let's start our first set with 185. And then kind of like as a sidebar, this model of vertical integration not only affects my training decisions like from a chronic point of view, and that I'm training all these qualities at once but emphasizing certain ones, it affects my training decisions from an acute point of view as well. I'm doing this first because I want to focus on strength in my upper body. And if you've been training for some time, you know that that first exercise is going to be the most fatiguing because you're the most fresh for it. And all the exercises after that aren't necessarily going to suffer, but they're probably not going to be as good as they could be if you had performed them first. So that's why I'm doing this first, right? I want to emphasize that quality as much as possible. First set of 5. Let's go up 10. That's pretty tough. Probably stick with that for one more set and then go 225 for the last one. I actually also like the overhead press as a means to practice your front rack a little bit more, just to gain some more familiarity there, because it's an opportunity to practice that in a much more quiet, right, circumstance. Like you're not trying to get all psyched up and go overhead with, a lot of weight. You're also not trying to squat with a ton of weight either. So. I don't know if I've ever actually done 225 for 5 before, so we're going to find out together. Alright, while I'm putting on my shoes for the next exercise, we can talk about another point that I want to make in this video. But best to go over what exercise I'm doing first and the way that I'm specifically doing this exercise. So I'm going to do some split jerks. I'm going to go from the front rack, but I'm going to try not to rest at all in between reps. So I'm going to catch the following rep in the dip of that rep, and then just try to go right into it. And the reasoning behind this is it feels like an extremely heavy plyometric, and that I'm trying to utilize the stretch shortening cycle as much as I can. Obviously, I'm going to be using the stretch shortening cycle if I do this or not, just because you're dipping in a split jerk regardless. But maybe I could theoretically assume that I'm going to be giving the tendon a little bit more extra love because I'm accepting that momentum, right, from that previous rep, that the tendon might be getting a little bit more deformation because there's just so much more stress being placed on the system. And this isn't even necessarily referring to vertical integration as much as it is the central point that if your training relies on just good, solid, fundamental principles, that decisions like this probably don't matter all that much. I'm not saying no training decisions matter, because they obviously do. Just like from a zoomed down point of view, volume, intensity, exercise selection in terms of like big archetypes matter. But when you get into the more granular decisions, like how I'm specifically doing split jerks and that I am repeating them and not resting, like am I actually going to notice a tangible gain or quality from that? Probably not. There's been so many times in my training where I've had a PR in an exercise that I didn't really practice at all in 6 to 8 weeks, just because like good training causes good gains, and those gains aren't so specific to the actual task, right? Like physical qualities aren't specific necessarily to a task, they're specific to the qualities that are expressed in a task. So then the question we're left is, well then why even implement these granular decisions? Why not just do everything, why not just do a regular split jerk and even worry about something like this? Well, because this is fun and novel and engaging. And if I feel like I'm gonna practice this much better than just doing a regular split jerk, if I'm entertained by it, if I'm excited by it, and I'm gonna do it better than I otherwise would, well then maybe that's worth exploring. See if I can show you a good rep of what I'm talking about here. Split jerks and just overhead work in general is something I've generally neglected in my training, so I'm excited about like really dedicating some good training time to try to improve there. Tuck time!
So it begins.
All right, we got 5 sets of 3. We're only gonna add weight if the previous set was ultra crispy and I nail it absolutely perfectly. Yes! I consider that pretty crispy. Oh my. Let's go to 250. Let's go ahead and bump this thing up to 2 plates and a quarter. I can take the rain on the roof of this empty house. That don't bother me. Yep, here we go. We obviously all know what the next logical step in weight is. Alright, here we go. Don't rush the smaller parts of this exercise in terms of, like, even just when you're recovering, be really precise with your steps. Probably be a little bit slower than usual. Because you want to set yourself up to be in the most perfect position to lower that bar back down from overhead. Because if you're rushing it at all and you get off kilter just a little bit, that mistake is going to be magnified because of these repeats. I'm just saying. Take it or leave it. Freaking wise guy. I don't know why I decided to walk that one back. I think I didn't want to lower another one. Something that's probably lost in today's training landscape is that these granular decisions are being placed as a point of emphasis, and the narrative is that those decisions are what is going to separate you not only as a coach but like as the person doing the program in terms of like receiving gains and making progress. And that's just not the case. It's most definitely not. I'd be hard pressed to put a percentage on it, but like, I don't know, 90% of what truly matters is going to be more similar than different from coach to coach and program to program. But then on the same hand, on the same coin, or is it on the other side of the coin? This is what allows us to have this huge, vast amount of creativity from program to program, and like for us to be able to discuss these ideas and concepts and be able to see where each person is coming from and not feel like we have to attack it. If you're coming from this point of view where good training is good training regardless, right, of these smaller decisions. That's how I try to look at it, and that's how I try to view most people's opinions on fitness and training, even if that's not what they're necessarily articulating. So, training is fun.